Well, have you hopped on a city bus lately? How did it go? We've seen tremendous population growth in our two biggest cities, so buses are often packed. There are also some changes on the horizon. Everything from new routes, a rapid transit system in Saskatoon, and some of the new buses are electric. But before we hit the road, we want to go back in time, when streetcars rolled through downtown.
It's neat to know that even 100 years ago, we had an active and pretty extensive public transit system.
So buckle up, you're in for a ride today on Blue Sky. You can call us with your stories of taking transit in Saskatchewan, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. So here's what got us thinking about transit.
Hey there, my name's Lindsay. I'm originally from Ontario, but I've been in Regina almost 15 years now, and I think I have a good question. Why did the city stop using streetcars? When I first moved here almost 15 years ago, it really felt like a driving town to me, but it seems like more and more people I know are taking transit or, thinking about different ways of getting where they need to go. And, we're all hearing the messaging about using our cars less, reducing our vehicle emissions. And it's neat to know that even 100 years ago, we had an active and pretty extensive public transit system.
So, before we look forward, we need to look back. Producer Nicole Huck is going to help us with this.
Okay, I want you to picture this. So a funky old train rolling through downtown on a rail line. It's attached to an overhead electric line, and most people just hopped on because cars weren't really a thing yet. Our cities were booming, and to get around, you took the streetcar.
So I actually know someone who knows a lot about this. Terry Hockness is an amateur historian in Saskatoon, very into history, very, very into history. He'll get going reading old Star Phoenix articles in his basement, and he'll sometimes forget what day it is. So as soon as we got this question, Nicole, I had to call him so he could reminisce about this old-timey stuff.
It would be very cool if we could jump back in time and just kind of relive the whole moment, not just the streetcars, but everything, just the way, people dressed up just to go out to buy milk.
Dressing up to buy milk? Lisa, just think of what we wear to work these days.
So back then, people looked good, but Terry says the roads started to become a bit of a mess.
You have to remember in 1913 for us, cars are becoming very popular, but still a lot of people are still using horses. So if you can imagine, our traffic bridge at one time had cars, streetcars, and horses and wagons all at the same time trying to cross. And of course, the traffic bridge was very narrow. So the trouble people would have had to face.
A very interesting traffic jam.
Yes.
Sounds inconvenient, but was it dangerous? Were there accidents?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Over the years, of course, there's accidents. There's people who are killed. They're hit by them. Even in 1922, one streetcar actually missed the traffic bridge and went over the bank, crashing onto the edge of the river.
Oh,
so there's
my
just
goodness.
Lots of interesting things that have happened.
Yikes. Yeah. So then what happened?
Okay, well, something better did come along. Two things, actually. Trolley buses. So these were on wheels instead of rail lines, and they could roll through more neighborhoods. And of course, cars. There were so many more cars.
And trucks, right? It's probably why there are so many Ford F-150s in Saskatchewan.
Well, yeah, that is the million-dollar question, right? And it is part of the story. We'll get to that. But first, I want you to meet Saskatoon's Jeff O'Brien. Hey, Jeff.
Hi, Alicia.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Nice to meet you here.
Nice to see you.
So, Nicole, Jeff O'Brien lives and breathes history. He's the City of Saskatoon's archivist. Why did you want to meet me here?
Because we're talking about streetcars, and this is a streetcar kind of place. This is a little parklet on 14th and Temperance, and it has been landscaped with cobblestones and streetcar tracks dug up from underneath city streets.
That's these right here?
That's those right here, yeah. That's right.
Okay, so what's the story here? Why don't we have them anymore?
Okay. In 1938, the street railway superintendent, George Archibald, goes to a conference, and he comes back all fired up about modernizing our streetcar system because the wave of the future is trolley buses, right? And trolley buses are just like a bus, right? You drive them around, just like a regular bus, except for they're electrical. They're powered by the same overhead lines, but they don't use railway tracks, and they're more comfortable. They're a better ride, easier on the customers. Also, when they pick up and drop off passengers, they can pull over to the street to the curb, right? Streetcars, they stop in the middle of the road. So when a streetcar stops to let people off or whatever, all the traffic stops.
Drivers are getting a bit pissed off.
But it's also the way that other cities were doing it. By 1938, half of the cities that had reported having street railway systems in 1924 had ditched them by 1938.
So we just did what everyone else was doing?
Yeah, that's it, really. They were old, it'd be far too expensive to fix them, so we just started purchasing something else, trolley buses instead.
Okay, well, Regina's story is way more dramatic.
Oh, they all burned up. They burned up in a fire in 1949. So.
See? Dramatic. That's Dana Turgeon. She works for the city of Regina and knows a lot about the history of the city. So before the fire, it's not like things were going all that well. Rail lines were being put in areas where there were no homes yet, and no people means no tax base. So we were already in a bit of a financial mess.
And it wasn't until 1927 that the city actually began to show a profit out of their streetcar lines. And then that didn't last very long because the Great Depression hit. So they did a bunch of things to try and move away from having so many lines and not enough traffic to go to them. They moved to one-man street cars, so they were running with just one operator instead of two. They pulled some tracks up, which made the tracks that did exist more valuable. And then they just tried to reduce service and kind of restrict it as much as they could to save as much money as they could.
And then there was a fire.
Yeah, 1949, when most cities were just starting to look into switching towards diesel buses, Regina had a terrible, terrible fire at their car barn. And this actually burned up like most of their rolling stock. They did not have very many streetcars left when they were done, and they also lost a bunch of new, they were called trolley buses, and so those were like if a bus and a streetcar had a baby, and they lost most of their rolling stock. They had to switch to diesel buses almost immediately.
So that was the real nail in the coffin for the streetcars.
It was. By 1950, they had their last streetcar run, and then they had their last trolley bus run 1966, and then we were switched to all diesel buses, and we've been all diesel buses ever since.
So what would you say was the big shift to Regina becoming a real car culture place?
Sorry, I missed that because of the
There's a
truck.
giant truck. It's saying, "Hear me roar." I was saying, when do you say? What would you say was the big shift for Regina becoming more of a car culture place?
Well, you see the starts of that in the 1950s. I mean, more development towards the outskirts of the city and more move away from the inner city. The more that transit mattered less than having a vehicle, and you see a lot more car dealerships and just sort of the same evolution as a lot of cities.
As we look at the history of this, I keep thinking about how I was crammed onto that public bus the other day with my son. We also have more and more people who are moving to our cities from places where they used to take transit, so they expect to be able to take the bus here, but our system just hasn't kept up. And I think that is why Lindsay asked us this question. If only we still had streetcars. And like Lindsay says, we are being encouraged to take transit more. It's good for our pocketbooks and for the environment.
But
There's a big but if you live in Saskatchewan.
our lives make this complicated. If my kid has to play basketball in the north end of Regina, I'm going to take my minivan. I mean, I've got 3 other kids that I'm hauling around, and it just takes too long to take the bus.
Yeah, you and everyone else. So this is where we start looking at what happened after we got rid of streetcars. You're not EAB, are you?
Yeah,
You are? Hey, looks like you're waiting for the bus.
No, yeah.
Hi, I'm Leisha.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
This is Eab Diab. He moved here from Toronto 5 years ago and is an expert in public transportation. He rode the bus today, but often he doesn't. So just think about that for a second. A person who gets super excited to write academic papers about public transit does not take the bus in Saskatoon. He says there are too many transfers, and so it takes too much time. There's nowhere to stand and warm up when it's cold. So, sure, it's fun to think about the good old days when everyone hopped on transit, but Eob's like, it's not like things were that good back then either.
A lot of people are nostalgic for the streetcars, but if they weren't entirely safe, maybe it's not a bad thing that we don't have them anymore. I don't know. What do you think?
Yes, I think this decision back in the time was making sense. But of course, we instead of doing other, like having the dedicated lanes for the streetcar, making sidewalks or connecting them to sidewalks, we decided to go the other way and remove them. And there was other options for us, for sure, if we want to keep the streetcar system going on.
So why do the cars always seem to win? Why? Why is it always about cars?
So I think cars provide more convenience, and also when after the World War II, all the war-like related industries shift to consumer goods, and one of these was car, and basically it become more affordable, and at the same time we see huge changes in the construction technology. So we were able to build more houses, cheaper houses, and basically we saw the shift. People start really we start seeing new suburban area development, and at the same time a lot of retail businesses headquarters moving out of the city center. So basically the car start to be essential for all this and to keep people moving.
That's Eob Diab, an expert on transit with the University of Saskatchewan, which brings us to today. We're asking you, what is transit like today? Do you ride the bus? Why or why not? And what would convince you to take the bus? You can call us 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Now, before we dig into this, I want to remind you that if you want to hear more great questions and answers, you can download our new podcast, Good Questions Saskatchewan. Find it on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, to talk about public transportation, we have two people who know a lot about transit. Nathan Looning from the City of Regina is the Acting Director of Transit. Hello to you, Nathan.
Morning.
And then we also have Mike Mullenbeck with the City of Saskatoon, who is the Director of Transit. Mike, hello.
Hi there.
Welcome to Blue Sky, both of you. You've been listening along to that fun trip back in time. What did you think? The main question there is, what if we still had streetcars? So, Mike, what's rolling through your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think there'd be some pretty cool things going on if we still had some streetcars. I've seen the old maps and see there's a lot of similarities to the directions we're moving in the future, and would be definitely an interesting prospect to have available to us.
Yeah. Nathan, what about you? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, when you look at the old maps, they are reminiscent of where we have a lot of our transit service today. And as Mike said, looking to move towards something similar like that in the future, where we have dedicated space for buses to make sure we can get across the city in a quick manner.
Did you learn anything that you didn't know? Nathan, I'm assuming you knew about the big fire.
Yeah, no, the fire is well known in our transit world here. That was just a devastating loss for the city at that time to try to recoup and get the transit system back in order.
Transit's always evolving, right, Mike? And you still go to conferences today, right? There was a reference in that tape that we heard there that somebody went off to a conference and came back all fired up, ready to modernize the transit system. Does that still happen today?
Yeah, that rings true for sure. I know, and I see Nathan at these as well. We go in the transit. It's a vibrant industry. There's a lot of dedicated professionals that are always looking for ways to share knowledge, improve transit as a whole, and you always come back with some great insight, great ideas, and everyone's always working together to try to just move the bar forward for everybody.
Is this a good time to think more deeply about transit? I'm guessing it is. I know we've had several conversations in Saskatoon. Nathan, is this a critical moment when it comes to transit and how we're thinking about the ways people get around cities?
Yes, definitely. We have seen a move towards transit here in Regina, a lot more people getting on the bus. And we set up our master plan here just in the last year to guide how we grow, how we set investment in transit to make sure that we can meet the needs of our growing community.
And then, Mike, what about you? What are your thoughts on this particular moment in time? I know how packed Saskatoon buses are.
Yeah, a lot of demand for our service, and I know there's lots of people that are looking to use transit as an option to make their trip. We're actively in the process of securing the funding for the BRT system, putting those dedicated running ways in, and as part of that, including a network redesign that's going to help support that. And it's going to be really interesting for our riders, because it's going to change some of the way that they use the system, offer a little bit more direct transit travel, and provide for a more reliable, more consistent, and more convenient trip.
Because it hasn't always met the needs of people. That's fair to say. For
sure. Yeah. No hiding that. I know that we have talked about the full buses we've seen, and the funding that we've seen recently, from the feds and from the city here to increase our fleet numbers and bring us back up to those levels, because our ridership has recovered too, just like Regina's has, and there's a lot of buses bursting at the seams out there.
Nathan, what's it like in Regina right now on the bus?
Yeah, I would say it's similar. We have seen a lot of people come back to the bus. So we did have a drop during the pandemic, but it has recovered and exceeded our ridership levels before that. So we want to make sure that we have a comfortable space for people to come take the bus and make sure they get where they want to go.
And do people have an expectation that they want to take the bus? It's something we've seen in Saskatoon. People move here and either they don't have a vehicle or they're just used to taking transit. What's your sense of that, Nathan?
Yeah, definitely. We've seen a lot of newcomers here who have maybe moved from communities that have a well-established transit system. And so there's an eagerness to use the system here. And it's our job here to make sure that we can have a system that meets their needs.
Mike?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of the growth we've seen in Saskatoon is pushed and driven by that. And just like Nathan's saying, there's an expectation of a certain kind of transit system. The bigger the center they come from, the more established it is, and there's that expectation that exists here. And in some places it's working really well. Other places there's some room for improvement. And we're in that awkward stage where we're moving from a big small city to a small big city, and with that there's going to be need for adjustments to help support that. It's geographically in the last 10 years significantly bigger, and that's had an impact on the way the service is. So how we right size that and bring all that into the fold with these new designs is going to be really impactful.
Okay, plenty to talk about today, but I first want to go to Doug, who's on the line in Saskatoon. Hi, Doug.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks. What's on your mind?
I used to work for transit, and so did my grandfather.
Oh.
And the grandfather was a driver, and I was maintenance and steam engineer there for 10 years. And the big thing is that I got to send the buses out for all the routes that were there. And I developed a sending out method that nobody else could believe that it actually worked, but it did. And Mr. Ross, who used to run the place, goes, "Where did you get that from?" I said, "Well, I thought it up myself because I'm into numbers and crazy puzzles and stuff like that, and that worked out good for me." Whereas my grandfather drove from about somewhere in the late 30s.
Wow.
Right when the streetcars changed over to trolley buses, because he drove a streetcar and then he also drove a trolley. So, and if you people are interested, they have streetcars that are restored out at the rail yard. If you go down the Pike Lake Highway, on your right, you'll see a great big train yard that has all antique trains and stuff in it. Well, they happen to have one streetcar that's mostly restored and one that they're just starting. So if you ever want to see one or stand in one, there you go.
That's so cool.
Other than that, it was lots of fun going to see it. I went and seen it myself. And he used to take me on the bus all the time because the grandfather drove, of course. And my mom would throw me on in one spot, and I'd sit in the front seat beside him, basically. And once we got done work, we'd take the bus down to where it turned right at his corner, and we just walk up the street to his house.
What about these days, Doug? Would you still be would you still be riding the bus today?
Well, I would, except I don't walk. I fell and hurt a whole bunch of stomach problems. Mm-hmm. And the one knee has gone out on me, so I can't walk much more than about half a block, and there's no transit near me. I'm in the back end of Carlton Drive, which is a real nuisance. But if the city would stop making all these crescents, and I know they like them because it looks nice and blah, 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 but one thing the city bus doesn't do too well is go down skinny little streets.
Thanks for calling, Doug. Those were some great stories. Appreciate hearing from you today. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
I used to bumper slide. Bye-bye.
Mike, you were nodding along to a few things. That yes, there are restored streetcars at the Rail Yard Museum.
Yeah, for sure. And we have an old I can't think of the name. It's a bubble bus or one of the old style high floor buses we have painted up in our garage as well.
Very cool. I want to ask you about cul-de-sacs and how cities are built, but we're going to save that for after news headlines. Nathan, I just want to quickly ask you: are there any restored Regina streetcars for people to check out? Do you know?
None that we have immediately, like in our garage, but we have had one when we celebrated our 100th year, and I'm not too sure where that is now. I think we donated it to a museum somewhere, but I can't tell you where that is.
Okay, well, that's okay. Maybe another podcast to find out where it is. Today I'm speaking with Nathan Looning and Mike Mollenbach. They are both transit experts with the City of Regina, City of Saskatoon. I'm Leisha Grabinski. You are listening to Blue Sky here on CBC Radio 1. Shantanu Datta has only lived in Saskatoon a few months. He moved here from Bombay and takes the bus regularly. He's been listening along to today's show and joins us right now with his perspective on things. Shantanu, hello.
Hi, Alicia. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us.
One correction. I came from Delhi.
I thought you had said Bombay. My apologies.
Yeah,
My apologies. Okay, so you came from Delhi. Either way, big change coming to Saskatoon. I guess you can't help but compare transit between the two places. What are the major differences?
I'll say that it was a pleasant surprise. I was expecting, considering Saskatoon's size, I was expecting maybe worse. I was pretty impressed by the expanse, the coverage of the buses, the transit system. It's almost comparable to where I come from, Delhi. I mean, both are very circular cities and very well covered. I keep giving this example. I took a bus from this area, almost southern end of the city I live in, which is Stonebridge, to the airport, which is the other end of the city. And it took me less than an hour. I cannot imagine doing that in any big metropolitan city in India. And it was a smooth ride, back and forth. But, the problem, aside from the fact that the coverage and the route expands, the problems would begin thereafter, which would be, the frequency. If I missed one bus, I'll have to wait for half an hour at the most. There'll be, apart from overcrowding, even service like, say, I'm not naming buses, but we have a bus here, which is the easiest way to go to downtown, which doesn't run after 6 p.m., which doesn't run on weekends. It does not really make sense, right, for people who do not want to use the car. These are the kind of, I'm sure these are teething troubles, and I'm sure the transit system and people there are working to address these issues. But, with a growing population, we read recently in CBC, right, some 14,000 odd increase in population over just 1 year. So the need to address these issues at maybe a faster pace.
And I'm wondering about your family. You mentioned to me you've got an extended family member who's making a very conscious choice not to have a car and to ride the bus. So tell me about that.
So my nephew, who has just turned 20, he has been living here. Is my sister's son. They've been living here for the last 4 years. He goes to university. He refuses to drive. He's a bit of an oddity, if I may put it. He's very environmentally conscious.
Very environmentally conscious, yeah.
Yes, he is. So he refuses to drive. He takes the bus. There's a bus to the university. And, there are times university from Stonebridge would be 15-minute drive? Not even 15 minutes. Would be like 14, 15 minutes drive. he takes on an average an hour, and sometimes if he misses a bus or there's no bus, a commute to a university should not take ideally 1.5 hours one way. And that's another point I've noticed. This is a university town, so you'll always have students. You will always have fresh newcomers without their own cars.
It's such an interesting point, Shantanu, and I've got a couple more questions for you. But because we have people with transit from both of our biggest cities, I just want to put a question to them quickly, because your nephew, who's making a conscious choice, I think that we're seeing a growing number of people who are very concerned about climate change, who are trying to build their lives in a way that their carbon footprint is not as large. Nathan, I'll start with you. Are you seeing that, and how important is that from the city's perspective to be able to have citizens who can make a choice that shrinks their carbon footprint?
Yeah, for sure. Having an accessible, easy-to-use transit system so people want to make that choice is very important. And we made steps here with us. We were electric in the past, and we're moving to electric buses in the future here with 20 electric buses coming here to even further reduce our carbon footprint. And we plan to be fully electric by 2039. So we want to get off on the right foot here and make sure that we can lead the way in having these buses that have a low carbon footprint.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, and to add to the points that Nathan's making, there's it's well known that good transit systems make for great cities. Whether you ride the bus or not, having great transit impacts everyone. It makes everyone's life better. It reduces congestion, speeds up travel times, reduces emissions. So our goals are always trying to increase service hours and try to find ways to put more vehicles out and have more capacity in our system and have more travel options by increasing the frequency. As the caller is talking about, I mean, it's pretty simple sometimes. Adding more frequency is more options means more availability for people to get where they're looking to, and makes the buses less full, and all of those things. So it's definitely what the goal in mind we have is.
Shantanu, I want to ask you about waiting for the bus and what your experience has been like this winter waiting for a bus.
Oh, I'll just give an example of last week only. So my daughter had this athletics meet at Fieldhouse. It finished at 8:30, 8:45 or something. Mm-hmm. We came out hoping to take the bus. We missed it just as we were crossing the road. The bus stand is on the other side. We saw the bus go by, and Google Maps showed the next bus was an hour later. There is, at that particular, and there are several bus stations in the city. There is no shelter. It was February 14th was, I think, pretty windy. It was very chilly. There was no point waiting. So eventually, half the time you end up doing an Uber.
Because you don't want to wait outside, right? Exactly. One thing I've thought of is why aren't there shelters to shield yourself from the elements? Have you thought that too, Shantanu?
Yeah, I mean, I come from India, where it doesn't snow as much as the weather is pretty inclement. Otherwise, in summers, in the monsoons, the rainy season, you have shelters are pretty much a given. Bus shelters, where would you stand otherwise? I mean, and in Saskatoon, where the wind chill factor sometimes goes like really crazy, you ideally should have, right, at almost every bus station.
So shelters are one thing on your list. Before we let you go, Shantanu, you have two people who are very interested in your perspective and who are working to improve the system. So what final words would you like to leave them with? What improvements would you like to see? I know you're based in Saskatoon, but in general, what would make things better?
I would say Mike and Nathan both address these issues. yes, frequency, it will not come overnight. And I think most bus riders are aware of that. It will not come overnight. But yes, but we have to make efforts to increase frequency, increase the numbers, because the city is going to expand. The city will expand both vertically and horizontally, and commuting will become more challenging rather. Sorry, as the years go by. There's no stopping that. So, and the more cars we put on road, it's going to environmentally bad, and B, it's going to choke up the road space we have. So eventually, we have to depend on transit, either BRT, as Mike was saying, or light rail system. So as of now, I will say frequency. I'll say more bus shelters. I will say make buses available even after peak hours or weekends. That's the time when people actually want to go out. So each time you do an Uber, or you have to take your car to wherever you are going.
So many good points, Shantanu. I really appreciate this conversation. I apologize again for my error at the start, but so nice to have you as part of the show today. So thank you.
Thank you, Disha.
Yeah, take care. Bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.
That is Shantanu Datta, who lives here in Saskatoon and rides the bus. We are talking about public transportation today. We have two guests with me. Mike Mullenbeck is with the City of Saskatoon. Nathan Looning is with the City of Regina. Before we go back to them, we do have a number of callers on the line who want to jump in here to the conversation. So James in Saskatoon joins us right now. Hello, James.
Hello. Yes, I started riding buses in Saskatoon in the early 60s when I used to come in to go to the exhibition in Pioneer Days and visit relatives here. Then we had a good electric bus system that got sold to Vancouver in the early 70s. And what I've seen in Saskatoon is the urban sprawl has just destroyed our bus system, and also I guess NIMBYs, because I live or I used to have a bus stop a third of a block away from my house, but because of some street problems, that bus was rerouted, and it went through the bus had to go through an exclusive part of our town, and the people there didn't like the people from my side of the freeway coming over to catch a bus on their side of the freeway because we weren't the right kind of people, so they got our bus canceled. So now where I live, the closest bus stop to my house to get to downtown is actually downtown. And that makes no sense at all.
Okay.
And I think about times when I've been in Victoria and I've been able to get up in the morning, buy a $5 bus pass, get on a bus, go to the ferry, take the ferry across to the mainland, buy a $5 bus pass there, go to Vancouver, right? Take the SkyTrain, take the C bus, tour around, get back to the ferry on the bus from Vancouver, and get back to the southern end of Victoria, all in 15 hours.
Yeah, you raise a couple good points. I want to ask both Nathan and Mike about that. James, thanks for calling.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so the two things I want to pick up from that, there is something about Saskatchewan people, they travel, it's cool to take transit in Vancouver, it's cool to take transit in Montreal, but there's been sort of a reputation that taking the bus in Saskatoon and Regina isn't always the coolest, there's some, it's kind of we could unpack that a bit further, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that, Nathan, that people seem willing to take transit in other places, but maybe not so much here. What do you think, Nathan?
I agree, and it goes back to some of the things that we've heard already from some of the callers. We are competing with the private automobile. With that, someone can get in their car, go anytime, and be there, in 15 minutes to get across the city. So there is a phrase in the transit industry that frequency is king. So if we have a bus that operates every 60 minutes, someone really has to plan their life around that about, wanting to take the bus, I have to be out here at this time. Whereas if you had a frequency, let's say, of every 10 minutes, they could just walk out to the bus stop. If they just missed one, okay, another one's coming in about 5 minutes. So that is something that, would drive people to use it. And that's what you see in some of those larger cities where you have that frequent bus service that is going to get people, and they don't really have to think about the schedule. They just go out there and do it.
We have that in Saskatoon. It's part of the reason why I have been able to do it with my kids, because if you head to Midtown, there's the 80s, the 82, 84, and I know that I'm not going to be stuck out there with my two very small kids in the winter waiting for a bus forever. One will come by. So, Mike, that's obviously intentional.
Yeah, there's a couple of years back, we created those high-frequency corridors, 8th Street, 22nd Street, Preston and Attridge. You can see there's those higher levels of frequency there where you don't need a schedule. You just walk up and, within 5 minutes, sometimes, on average, there'll be a bus coming because the buses are spaced within 10 minutes. So when you see frequency better than half an hour, 20 minutes, 15 minutes, and sometimes pushing 10 minutes in some areas, you can definitely see the improvements that has on the easeability. And you're not thinking about what you're doing. You're just kind of being a part of it.
Those are busy streets. They're key transit routes. I'm wondering how difficult it is to modernize a public transit system when we have built cities based on cars. Like somebody mentioned cul-de-sacs, right? So just everything about our cities is based, for the most part, on automobile transportation. So, Mike, how difficult is it to shift things when really the cars have ruled the road?
I definitely think that the build form definitely adds some logistical issues at times where you need to be creative. It can at times limit the number of possible paths you can make, and it really sets in stone what those routes can be in some neighborhoods. But it comes down to the fact that you're competing with a car which is infinitely frequent and has infinite routing options. So what do you do? And that becomes the point of first, people have to make the conscious decision that it's something they want to do, and secondly, it's providing those options to people so that way it isn't waiting for an hour for a bus. It isn't waiting 30 minutes for a bus at times. It's the bus comes with frequency so that we can get out there.
Yeah, and for the record, we have a car. We drive all the time. And we have that privilege to be able to make a choice, and it is often easier. So I don't want to create any illusions here. We try to take the bus, but it's true. A car is more convenient. Nathan, just quickly before we get to a couple callers, your thoughts on the evolution of cities, the emphasis on cars, and how difficult it is to modernize a public transit system.
Yeah, ideally, when you're planning out a transit system, you do almost like a grid-like pattern, so you can travel from one part of the city to the other without having to make too many deviations. And you do see some of the modern or more recent development areas where there is a little more artistic design in that, and it's sometimes not the best layout for transit. But we work with our planning department to make sure that we can at least get those key corridors planned well for transit so we can get through that neighborhood well.
Let's go to Florence, who joins us right now on the line in Regina. Hi, Florence.
Hi there. Yes, I'm a transit user in Regina. And first I want to commend Regina Transit for improvements to transit over the last decade or so. Here's a few examples. The express routes to cut down on traveling time, making all buses low floor and accessible, and free transit for children 13 and under. But we need further improvements, and here are a few suggestions. More frequent service, as one of your guests just suggested, every 10 minutes would be wonderful. And certainly better Sunday and holiday service, at least every 15 minutes rather than every hour. And fare-free transit for high school students. That's my short list. How to pay for it, this is just a final comment. Regina Transit is subsidized by local taxes. However, I think we should all note that private vehicles are also subsidized. It is, after all, Regina taxpayers who foot the bill for road infrastructure and road maintenance. private vehicles also have many hidden costs, including air pollution, climate change, accidents, congestion, and even noise pollution. So in my view, we cannot afford to keep subsidizing private vehicles. Let's all get on the bus. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence. Appreciate the call. We also have Rhonda on the line in Regina. Hi, Rhonda.
Good afternoon, Leisha. Excuse me. Excuse me. I grew up in Melbourne in Australia, which is a large city. The downtown area itself is large, and then, has just that whole spread of suburbs around it. And when I was growing up, we called them trams instead of streetcars that were in the downtown area of Melbourne, and they also spread out to some suburbs around Melbourne. And downtown, it was a great way to be able to traverse the city and be able to hop on and hop off. There weren't any traffic issues because the streets were wide, and it was also single-lane traffic. So, and then there was a barrier for people to stand in front of, waiting for the tram. So again, that alleviated any concerns with traffic. So it's a little bit of a nostalgia when I think about streetcars. And as far as Regina goes, I'm retired, and I'm a person that does not like winter, so I can hibernate when the winter comes along. Mm-hmm. But when I do have to head out, I'm one of these people that just gets cold very, very quickly. I like 20 degrees and above is my preference. And so I'd love to see every bus stop have a shelter that would be more enclosed, because even the shelters that we have, the bottom there's a space at the bottom where the wind can come in.
Yeah, they're not warm.
Exactly. And the doorway, and then the wind comes in and circles around. So if we could have like an enclosed shelter where they had one of those, those plastic curtains that you can move through
a door, a heater.
Exactly. And then have some solar panels on top of the shelter, which would supply the energy for a heater inside the shelter.
Now you're talking, Rhonda.
And you bet.
One can wish. We do have people with transit, so they've been listening. I appreciate these ideas.
Yes, so this is a definite message to Nathan. I hope you're listening well, Nathan. In Regina, there was one heater that was put in a shelter downtown, but the doorways were still open, and the heater was put up high. So even if it was on, heat rises. And so you didn't get any benefit from the heater, unfortunately. So anyway, those are my adamant suggestions for bus shelters. Please.
Well, thanks, Rhonda. I appreciate the call. Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye. That's Rhonda joining us in Regina. No, Nathan, I do want to give you the opportunity to respond. Although I just want to take the conversation in a just a slightly different direction before we end today, and we only have a few minutes left. So, Lindsay's the person who kind of put us on this path to have some fun thinking about history, about streetcars, and that question, like, what if we still had them? But she's been just in general thinking a lot about transit and how to get more people to ride the bus. So let's listen to her thoughts on this.
My partner always says, because he's lived in bigger cities too, and he's like, you're not really going to get people choosing a different option for how to get around, whether it's like bikes or those e-scooters or walking or transit. You're not going to really get people to move away from their Ford F-150s until we make it inconvenient to drive or more convenient to move around in a different way.
So that idea that if and I think parking comes up, if it's tricky to park, if you had another way, you might choose another option. So Nathan, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that as we move forward with transit and trying to accommodate people better. What are your thoughts on that idea? We have to make it more inconvenient to drive your vehicle. Nathan?
Yeah, no, I agree. if you look at our downtown in the city of Regina here, we do have a lot of parking, a lot of surface parking lots. So it is easy, again, to jump into your vehicle and just to drive and to park somewhere. Where there is a lack of parking, then people will start to look for other options. So that's where transit comes in. But you do have to, if you do want to enact some of those things, you have to make sure that the transit system is ready to respond to that. So have the capacity on the bus ready to accept those customers that are making that jump to the bus.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think taking down the barriers to using transit also helps, making it easy to find fare, pay for fare, and making sidewalks more accessible. Every transit passenger at one point in time is a pedestrian, ends the day as a pedestrian. So, how are we making sure that people can get where they're going, the facilities are there, and these things that become barriers or issues are minimized, because that's the way you get people engaged and comfortable in using things. There's no surprises. Things are reliable. When all of those boxes start to get checked, it makes sense, and you're willing to give up some of the convenience that a personal vehicle does, because you know the good that using transit is.
And something that a caller brought up, the free fare for kids under 13 in Regina. Saskatoon will have that, right? I think it was approved and starting in September.
Yeah, so we do have some reports that should be coming here in June, discuss some options for council and for looking for implementation in September here.
Okay. This has been an interesting conversation. I appreciate both of you coming in today, to listening along to our look back at history, and for talking about transit today. So Nathan, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you.
That's Nathan Looning, who's the Acting Director of Transit for the City of Regina. And next to me, Mike, thanks so much for being here for the hour. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me here.
That is Mike Mollenbeck, who is with the City of Saskatoon. He is the Director of Transit. Now, if we didn't get to you, you can always call our talkback number, 1-800-661-7540. You could also email us, bluesky@cbc.ca.